It's a print. I'll take 5 copies. If I put this in my pocket, will that thing still work? Or do I have to put it outside my pocket? Can you hear me now? Okay. It fell. Well, we better get down to business. The problem of identity, which has been obsessing me of late, is because I'm gradually getting there, is that we permitted people to take it away. And there's a lot of people out there wanting to take away our identity because it makes them more comfortable with their uncomfortable identity. Now, every movement is a scream for recognition of one's identity. That's what the blacks were screaming about, that's what the gays scream about, that's what women scream about. Men are too angry to scream, so they sweat in their own rage. But every movement creates an enemy. And if you listen to the movement, then it tells you, like with the blacks, Whitey was the enemy. And with women, man was the enemy. And it goes way back. With Christians, Jews were the enemy. And with Protestants, Catholics were the enemy. It gives you a lot of energy. And when it's a struggle for identity, you move beyond enemies because you are the enemy. When I wrote this little book that Mike talked about, There Are Men Too Gentle to Live Among Wolves, or when I wrote the book A Modern Priest Looks at His Outdated Church, I was screaming. In fact, A Modern Priest, which will be reissued in a couple weeks, Jim Stewart said the other day when we were talking, he said, that book sounds like it was written yesterday. I said, isn't that amazing? And then in the Tribune this morning, I see an article. In fact, I clipped it and brought it with me. It's really hard to believe, man. Bishop's letter, listen to this headline. This guy ought to get us bonus. Bishop's letter condemns sexism, opposes ordination for women. I guess that's not sexist. But it's the same old shit. Birth control, divorce. You just can't believe you're reading it, you know. And I remember my editor at Simon Schuster, I had just gotten my doctorate in religious philosophy at Catholic University, and I was still kind of up to my ass in footnotes. And he said, it's really brilliantly written, but forget the footnotes and let it be one prolonged scream. No, he said, let it be a kick in the balls, because that's all the bishops understand. He said, how many learned articles have you written? I said, dozens. And what reaction did you get in all those learned journals? I said, well, my bishop called me one time and told me to be careful. When Modern Priest came out, he didn't tell me to be careful because it was a prolonged scream. And what was it a scream for? It was a scream for my identity. And when I got 30,000 letters that I read, every person in there was screaming for identity. And they still are. And I see why God let me lose mine. Because so damn many people lost theirs. And you know, like Larry King says, America's best poet, or Wayne Dyer said America's poet laureate, or Abby does. That's all real nice. But you know, the nice thing about my life is that I've never really gotten any recognition. You'll never see in a compendium that Modern Priest Looks at His Outdated Church was something that really helped change the Catholic Church. And the same way with poetry. I mean, if you want to be a recognized Pulitzer Prize-winning poet, for Christ's sake, you got to go to a university, or you got to write intellectual poetry. And I thank God that I have been, like I called my friend today, Carl Hollander, who is an authority on anger, and I said, I'm writing something about men's anger towards women and women's anger towards women. He said, Jim, that's not anger, that's rage. He says, there's a distinction between rage and anger. I says, well, let's talk more, Carl. He says, rage makes you white. And anger makes you red. And rage makes you tremble. But he says, you don't have creative... I met Matthew Fox one day and he said, I love your creative anger. And Carl says, you don't have creative anger. He says, you have creative rage. And if she said, if a man or woman can harness their rage, then they don't sound bitchy. The women's movement largely sounded bitchy. There were a few that could harness their rage, like Germaine Greer, but see, Germaine Greer would go the whole route. She's now saying, I'm going to explore the inner space, not the outer space. So women, it's okay for women to redefine women. I don't give a damn if they redefine women. They start redefining me that I got to become this wimpy nerd that Robert Bly wants me to be, hopping around flowers and, you know, and beating a drum and singing hymns. Screw it. I mean, he's a nice man. Iron John, like a history of mythology. It didn't tell me anything. I see it number one on this list. I suppose wives are giving it to their husbands. It sure as hell isn't selling because men are reading it and saying, wow, I really found it. There are men too gentle to live among wolves, who prey upon them with their IBM eyes and sell their hearts and guts for martinis at noon. There are men too gentle for a savage world, who dream instead of snow and children and Halloween, and wonder if the leaves will change their colors soon. There are men too gentle to live among wolves, who anoint them for burial with greedy claws and murder them for a merchant's profit and gain. There are men too gentle for a corporate world, who dream instead of candied apples and Ferris wheels, and pause to hear the distant whistle of a train. There are men too gentle to live among wolves, who devour them with eager appetite and search for other men to prey upon and suck their childhood dry. There are men too gentle for an accountant's world, who dream instead of Easter eggs and fragrant grass and search for beauty in the mystery of the sky. There are men too gentle to live among wolves, who toss them like a lost and wounded dove. Such gentle men are lonely in a merchant's world unless they have a gentle one to love. See, I always thought that there would be a person who would come along and tell me the answer to my sadness, to whatever that kind of thing is. You ever have that kind of thing? You know things aren't right. You're trying like hell. And I know everybody that I've ever met at Unity or that reads my poetry is trying like hell. They want to become a person. And that's why I love doing it. Because there's not a person in here that I most likely couldn't be friends with and couldn't be friends with. We wouldn't have something to share. Because we're at that level of wanting our identity. And we're saying, there's just something wrong. A kind of a malaise. You know, if it's something very specific, you go after it. But you said, just still, how you doing? Well, I've been 8 years on the course, and there still seems to be something missing, you know? Good. I did Est, I did Lifespring, I did Nirvana, and those I never loved. How much time spent in motion with a motionless heart? Listening to the words which only echoed in the clouds, hoping to make amends for what I never did. How much love I wasted on those I never loved. Longing to be alone with my dreams, fearing to walk away from barnacles of childhood. Promising to return when I'd never been there at all. That's a lost identity. And that's what everybody I've ever known or loved has. You see, it's inherited. My parents didn't know who they were. And so for a while you get mad at your parents. You got to create that enemy, you know. I remember when I was really angry at the Pope. Now I see the poor bastard doesn't know what to do. How do you change a church that doesn't have any suffragans? I got a classmate that's a cardinal, believe it or not, and I see Eddie sitting up there with his little scarlet hat on. And I always think of him shivering his way through school because he was always cold. I think, what's he going to do? Just sit up there. Who's going to oppose? First of all, I'm never comfortable with a man eating kielbasa in the Vatican. You know, he should be eating lasagna. But the man had the same education I did. Same degrees, studied the same authors, and he comes to totally different conclusions. But I'm not angry anymore. I know that he's helpless. He's absolutely can't get out of it. Because what happens when you're not free to regain your identity. When you're not free to regain your identity, you create dogma. And you don't have to be Catholic, Orthodox, Jewish, or a good organized atheist to create dogma. All you have to do is be scared and angry. Ever turn the sound off on one of those fundamentalist preachers? Watch the bastard's eyes and watch the inflection and so forth as he is sending souls to hell that aren't saved. You know, but I mean, I'm not even feeling bad about him. I just don't want him to throw it on me, so I'm not going to listen. So no matter who it is that says they're going to tell me what my real identity is or what my definition is, when you've been defined by experts, then you don't go to amateurs. And I was defined by experts. I was defined by the church. I was defined by very strong Irish parents. And there was no way that I could escape that and establish my own identity. Gradually, my parents began to recognize that they did not own me. I think I was 40. I think we could have an opinion at 30 at the dinner table. But, you know, and I say that without any hostility because I was not yet ready to seek an identity. And everybody will seek to define us because it's a projection. If a person doesn't know who they are, if a lady doesn't know who she is, she got to blame somebody, she creates the enemy. I'm not saying men didn't do a bad job, women didn't do a bad job. We all did a bad job. And we all did a perfect job. So we don't need critics. We need to enlist each other's help. Siggy married Babs because she was poised and sophisticated. She could talk about anything at parties. She had an MA in French literature with minors in cordon bleu cooking and Eurasian art. And she had been in analysis for 7 years. There's a definition. Babs married Siggy because he was a prominent attorney, was successful in the commodity market, could talk about anything at parties, had written a book about the crime rate in Pakistan, and had been in analysis for 11 years. Siggy divorced Babs because she was poised and sophisticated, never stopped talking about her MA in French lit, her cooking and Eurasian art, and the 7 years of analysis. Babs divorced Siggy because he was a prominent attorney and he couldn't shut up about his success in commodities, the crime rate in Pakistan, and the 11 years of analysis. A year later, Babs entered the convent. Siggy married a high school graduate who didn't know torts from sow bellies and presumed Freud was wanted for indecent exposure in Pakistan. But she makes grape jello with raspberries in it, laughs loudly at all his jokes, and has long legs that turn him on. They've been happily married for 11 years and have 4 great kids. It's all a process of redefinition. And everything I write is about identity. Everything. Because that's all I'm searching for. Once you find your own identity, you find God. Cheryl was saying the other day that there really is no such thing as growth. And I said, that's an interesting comment. I said, you don't grow, you just shuck. You get rid of stuff. It's all there. I guess that's what the Course says, you know. Love is letting go of fear and all that. But if I want to find out who I am, then I got to become the authority. And I don't really know what has happened to my sex. I'm really concerned about it, because I just think that men have not been able to kind of express their identity. Maybe in this group. But I was reading today, I had no idea of this. There's only 100,000 people that go to Unity churches. There's more people pass through St. Patrick's to light a candle on Sunday in New York than 100,000 people. All the Unity churches all over this country, all the Science of Mind churches, they're just a drop in the bucket. So we just can't ignore people trapped in organized religion. I see 700,000 people marching about abortion, which probably is a big deal. The right to life or the right to death, whatever that, I really can't get off on that, but I thought all those 500,000, 700,000 people marching, most of the abortions will probably be like teenagers in places like the south side of Chicago. They'll probably cover about 80%, although I don't know the figures. But I thought, look at all the people trapped in orthodoxy. There was a lady that wrote something. Hillsdale College puts out a good thing, and I don't know the hell she is, but she writes very well, from Clark University, and she says, students taking college ethics are debating abortion, euthanasia, capital punishment, DNA research, and the ethics of transplant surgery, while they learn nothing about private decency, honesty, personal responsibility, or honor. She knows what else she's talking about. See, the Catholic Church chooses abortion. I only use the church because I know it so well. It's just another institution. I love the Catholic Church, and I always will. I've thought many times about going back to the priesthood. I mean, my marriages didn't work, so I might as well give celibacy another shot. Give it one more shot, you know? Or either that or be a nice way to meet a nice Catholic girl, you know what I mean? But it's a funny organization. Any kind of orthodoxy is a difficult sort of thing to comprehend. The church would focus on abortion. I was actually, one of the times I went to church in LA some time ago with my Catholic friend who said, let's go to this church, I really like this priest. He did everything but hold the fetus up in the pulpit and say, look what I found out in the neighborhood here. It was just dreadful. I mean, I want to stand up and protest. I didn't come here to hear about a struggle for abortion. But if you don't have anything to offer people fighting for personal spirituality and wanting to grow and to become and starving because they don't have spiritual identity, because they've been trapped and they can't outgrow it because they still live with guilt, fear, and talk about abortion. Used to be communism. That ain't going to work much now with Russia. China might bop back in, but you know, we've got to create that enemy and keep our mind off the fact that this fascistic church is making immoral statements. You want to go down and get one of those annulments? Who would go and ask for an annulment, you know? But the annulment, my sister-in-law said today, I said, you get Tom's copy of his annulment? I want to read the actual thing. I never saw one in print. I know they're pretty thick. And I called 3 or 4 churches to find out if I could get one, how much it cost, and you know, how long it would take. It depends. It was almost as vague as, you know, as a dentist. But the church has now changed marriage from a contract to a covenant. So, nobody's ever had a covenant. Any of you married here, you think you're married? It might be your 4th try. You are not married. I guarantee you, if you read that material, you'll know that you've never been married. I don't think you could be. Mary and Joseph, maybe. It's the same way in anything, though. You can turn unity into dogma. I got one friend I just won't talk to about the Course in Miracles. Scripture is anything but a kind of channeling. I don't see my best poetry as anything but channeling. We all channel. So if you want to establish your own identity, if a book helps me, I read something in here, and I never liked St. Paul. I always liked Mark. Parts of this you don't understand or that you don't understand. And you go to another country like Thailand or Manila, or you see all these people who never read the Course, never read Scripture, kindest, most loving people in the world. Then your mind starts to work. And you say, what is it? What is it? Or you see people within a very orthodox structure who are the kindest, most loving people in the world. You see Catholics go to Mass every Sunday, communion, confession, who are some of the most kindest and loving people that I know. Jews, Orthodox Jews, wouldn't allow a Reformed rabbi into Israel. They'd shoot the sucker. Kind, sweet people. And then at the other end, you see the Arabs fighting the Jews. I hope Yasser's gone. You know, that son of a bitch, man. And you see the Irish fighting north and south, and the whole thing becomes, okay, what goes through your head as you're establishing your own identity? You think, who am I is the only question. And somebody's going to try to tell you that you're wrong. And so the biggest thing in the whole world is to have the courage to stand up and to say, this is who I am now. And I don't know who I'll be tomorrow. Maria, lonely prostitute on a street of pain, you at least hail me and speak to me while 1,000 others ignore my face. You offer me an hour of love, and your fees are not as costly as most. You are the Madonna of the lonely, the firstborn daughter in a world of pain. You don't turn fat men aside or trample on the stuttering shy ones. You're the meadow where we desperate men find a moment's comfort. Men have paid more to their wives to know a bit of peace and could not walk away without the guilt that masquerades as love. Your body's more Christian than my bishop's, whose gloved hand cannot feel the dripping of my blood. Your passion is as genuine as my own without paying aught but your fee. You know nothing of virgin births and immaculate conceptions, but you touch man's flesh and caress a skin alive. You make a hell of a lot more sense than stock markets and football games, where sad men beg for virility. You offer yourself for a fee, and who offers himself? The wonder is that at times you are gentle and concerned, warm and loving. Identity, truth, experience. I remember when I first wrote that poem after I left. In fact, the lady was someone I'd known as a priest, lovely woman in Flint, Michigan, right in the heart of old General Motors town, a black parish where I was assigned. She was a really sweet lady. Some lady in La Jolla, when I left the priesthood and became a psychologist and all that, and she said, "That's trite. That's a cliche." Boy, it really hurt me. So I almost, then you get afraid to show it to anybody. I thought, well, I thought that was one of my good ones, And but again, it's identity. And somebody just thinks, $7 for fucky, which includes the room. While at the casino tables on the compound, ladies with hair piled exotically on stiff hair toss their $25 chips away with bored abandon and smile wistfully at the native boys, lusting cautiously, but too frightened to make a move, satisfied to sit in the sun and feel the heat in their loins and read about the great Gatsby. And I return with my identity crisis only partially resolved, wondering if I'm any better off than the middle-aged couples or the prostitutes who never seem to have one. It gets better all the time. But at the core of it, I think to have lived a whole life and not to know who you are, if you've tried, must be the greatest tragedy. If you never tried and didn't give a damn who you are, as when you lived in a functional universe like my parents, where this is my dad, this is my mother, this is a husband, this is a wife, he works, she stays home, it was a little easier because the function was so all-absorbing and the expectations so minimal. But now I can look back on my father's rage and I can understand it. I mean, my mother was married to her 7 sons. This guy just supported the family. What anger. Well, he took it out in his share of alcohol. A friend of mine was saying that this used to be an Elks Club, and I was remembering when I used to go to the Elks Club about 3 nights a week to get my dad out. My mother was in the car, you know. Daddy, won't you come home? Jimmy boy, how you doing, you know? I loved him when he was high. I didn't want to leave, he didn't either. I didn't like the booze, I just liked the company. But now, we're looking for identity. How can they be so happy? Mexican fruit pickers with 3 kids under 5. Immigrants mopping garages bigger than their whole house. Vagrants who walk 2 miles to find a restroom. Janitors who can't spell Oleg Cassini or Calvin Klein. How can they be so happy? Jobless blacks screaming at a football game on TV. Weary laborers who can't send a kid to college. Grinning doormen who can't afford a dentist. Men washing cars who never had one of their own. How can they be so happy when Elvis seemed as miserable as Howard Hughes? And even old man Rockefeller didn't seem the picture of joy. Sometimes Bel Air and Lake Forest, Montauk and Malibu, graystones and brownstones and the sprawling palaces of mediocre actors and fleeting rock stars seem lonelier and more dismal to me than Harlem and Watts. And maybe there's a reason I confuse Forest Hills with Forest Lawn. Well, lately I'm changing my attitude about happiness and taking a closer look at simplicity. Christmas madness finally escaped me. Exorbitant restaurants seem as vulgar as decorator homes. Ski lodges don't seem half as much fun as snowshoes, and lavish hotels remind me of lonely mausoleums. Soon enough, the sons of the boat people will own my house, and blacks will fight Koreans for Beverly Hills. Meanwhile, it's revealing that amid movers and shakers, tycoons and skyscrapers, and electric entrepreneurs, the happiest man I saw today was shining my boots in a basement barber shop. Am I getting too heavy? Never know where I'm going when I'm up here, you know? Well, Regina's proud of her new executive office and the perks that once were the sole property of men. And I'm just as proud of my new recipe for tuna casserole and the way spray and wash takes pizza stains out of my sport shirts. Regina reads the Wall Street Journal, Money Magazine, Forbes, the U.S. News and World Report. I read the Green Grocer, Better Homes and Gardens, and pay much closer attention to the detergent commercials on TV. This all in the name of a wonderful new world. Now, she can make it without me picking up tabs and paying the bills. And I can make it without her cooking my food and doing my shirts. God, I love that spray and wash. The only problem is we can't figure out what we have in common, which is what started this whole revolution in the first place. I can't stand Money Magazine or the boring Wall Street Journal, and she never answers when I brag about my all-color bleach. So we decided just to drift apart in the name of personal liberation. But the only part that really rankles me is that she's been telling everyone I used her just to get her tuna casserole. I suppose there are some people whose parents did not try to define them, who didn't think that the kids belonged to them. We're certainly getting better at that. But then we might get caught in what is a man, what is a woman, defining that, and then a church defining our relationship with God, and then school, for God's sakes, defining what is education. So you are really pretty well screwed up by the time you get anywhere in the system. And so if there's not an individual who is a victim of lost identity, that sure is one hell of a strong human being. I love what Joseph Campbell, they said, Joe, if you could go back, what age would you want to be? I kept thinking, yeah, there's a guy. I mean, he looked like he was 50 till he died. But I thought, what age would Joe want to be? He said, I wouldn't want to go back past 75. Isn't that wonderful? I wouldn't want to go back past 75. And that's when he felt he really got it together, you know. There's hope. But everything is a definition. And why does somebody want to define us? Well, it's pretty easy, pretty obvious. Why do people try to convince us of things that they're right? Why do we argue? I mean, when I was really insecure as a priest, I broke the convert record for the whole state of Michigan, actually for the whole Midwest. National average was 1.7 converts a year. I made 104. Wives were dragging their recalcitrant husbands from all over Michigan. Just meet him, you'll love him. He's really wonderful, he's very nice. He's good in confession, he's easy. I wouldn't go inside a goddamn Catholic church. No, Connie, just meet Father Kavanaugh. It's great. And if you're totally insecure, then you can convince this person that you're right. And the more you have, the larger the numbers. You know, that's the way it is. So, the definition. And I think the thing between man and woman, which is really the basis of a lot of things, I mean, it can be the focal point, really brings it all together. I think when you talk about identity, you got to talk about relationships, ultimately. Because for a while, I mean, we borrowed the Spanish word macho. And I was talking to this lady that I'm going to learn Spanish from better. I know it pretty well, but I was kind of talking to her and said, I want to speak fluent Spanish if I'm going to live around here. I like those people. I know their language. And she said, que c'est la mamá de Tarzan. She thinks she's the mother of Tarzan, is the opposite of macho. Isn't that wonderful? La mamá, so I just say, she's the la mamá de Tarzan. So it was an effort to redefine. In the process of identity, I'm trying to discover who I am. And so I have to beat off all these people who tell me who I am. Man or woman. And in a relationship, it can become a very dependent relationship, or it can become an independent relationship. But the basis of it is, and I didn't believe this for a very long time. The Course talks about illusions. I always thought there's some woman that's going to have it so far together and be so wonderful that she's going to take away all my pain. No, it's not going to be a woman. I just have to write one more book. I mean, I got 35 out there somewhere now, but I'll write one more. And that book is going to sell 1 million copies the first week, and then I'm going to feel real good. And then gradually we recognize that, I don't use the word that Joe Campbell used, bliss. I use the word passion. and that we got to find our passion. And it's only finding that passion because that passion is our identity and that passion is God. Bliss was a little too blasé for me, but that's just my scene. See, and if people get a distorted identity and if they're really angry, I mean, it's always the strongest women I knew who were going to assertiveness class. It wasn't some sweet little thing, you know. So I have this friend, Francine, I wrote this poem about her. She laughed later, but... Francine is in her 6th week at the Acme Assertiveness Institute. After 3 weeks, she was fired from Harvey's Auto Parts after assertively cursing several parts of Harvey. 2 weeks later, her father threw her out the front door following a vicious, assertive attack on her mother's meatloaf. The next weekend, a 4-year relationship with Leo ended when she broke his ankle during foreplay. Later, she assaulted a bus driver, threw pork chops at her butcher, and punched out Leo's new date at an Elks picnic. In recent weeks, she attacked her hairdresser, slapped a Sears repairman, tried to saw her carpenter, bit a policeman, and sued her attorney. Next week, she will graduate from Acme Assertiveness Institute with honors. She is very assertive. They had one hell of an exciting divorce. With passion and orgasmic energy dormant since the very early groans of courtship. With a rare eloquence of profanity seldom heard even in their most violent of love sounds. And a startling recall of each least cruelty. When once even birthdays and anniversaries slipped by like another rainy day in Seattle. What love, or its fiercest facsimiles, had never evoked, now flowed like turbine-powered virginal combustion, as a stale and quite commonplace nuptial erupted into a really quite magnificent divorce. It's definitions. Now, the thing to do is really get mad, you know, to hate women or to hate men. And we know that's escape, same way, I'm not saying you shouldn't hate a few. I mean, I think this forgiveness shit, before you've really been mad, is for the birds. You do not forgive until you've properly hated. You know, I've been around the Course in Miracles quite a bit and other things, you know, too. And geez, you get in the Course in Miracles, you think anger's a no-no. And anger's a tremendous source of creative energy. And there's some people that don't deserve forgiveness for a hell of a while. I am not God. I am his ray, his son, his whatever you want to call me. But, I mean, I could not brush Judas off and say, go do your work, baby, and I'll see you tomorrow. Not for me. But when I forgive, I forgive. And if you get appropriately angry, but see, the whole thing can be just a kind of a game. Oh, thanks, Steve. How'd you know? Did you hear Clinton can't talk anymore now? He's not supposed to give any speeches because he got a bad voice? Guess who will take over, ladies? Madam Hillary will be there, baby. That's a perfect example. All these weak men and strong women. You know, Dan Quayle's wife, she looks like she could grind walnuts in cool day. But that's really what's happened. See, we got so many weak men because we're intimidated. I was scared of women before they started getting mad. You know, you see a really attractive, well-dressed woman, I wouldn't go near her. You know, you see one that maybe she's, you know, I thought Thailand was the place to go because they couldn't speak English. You know, you go over there, and if you were white, they thought, oh, you're really lovely. And that was a lot easier than confronting a sophisticated, intelligent, well-dressed, clever, beautiful American woman when your self-confidence, your ego's about that big, which mine was and is most of my life. And that changes very slowly, I guess. But I think men, in the process of this clash, you know, just became, a lot of us became wimps. Not just wimps, but the psychologists told us to. They said, if you want to be a good kind of man, you gotta cry. Well, I try like hell to cry. It's really hard for me to cry. But I found out that if you cry once, the woman says, oh my God, you're sensitive. If you cry twice, she says, Jim, are you okay? And if you cry 3 times, she says, for God's sakes, get it together. But we, you know, in the process, I think it's either suppressed rage on the part of men, or I don't think it's fear anymore. I think there's a rage there, but that they have to get through, that they have to touch. You know, and then we look at all the sex image, People magazine, who is the sexiest man in America? Nick Nolte. Not John Ritter, you know, no. Frank Sinatra. Not Danny Kaye, you know. God, that's funny. All the men. Patrick Swayze, Mickey Rourke. You know, every guy's a bastard. And those are the great sex symbols. So, do we... Now, I refuse to have a feminine side. Who decided I had a feminine? Who translated anima of Jung into feminine? You got a feminine side and a masculine side. Hey, no, man, I'm trying to have a masculine side. That is a total cop-out. And a woman has a feminine side and a masculine side? I mean, it's a confusion of thought. But there's always been a pact between humanistic psychologists, priests, and women. In the priesthood, they said, we will make you heroes and martyrs if you make us saints. And it used to be, and I started with humanistic psychology, right with Carl Rogers and the whole gang, next door neighbors, and you look out there at your workshop, be about 92% women. Who bought the books? You know, in every workshop, a woman was trying to get you to change this sullen, quiet man into a normal human being. And I said, he is a normal human being. That's how he is. When men are really pissed, they withdraw. And he is really pissed. And if you don't read his mind, nothing's going to happen. I had a funny one, though. I was looking for this poem I wrote. I read one serious one, then one funny one. I can watch my time or get blabbing away. Oh, we got time. You getting restless, just if you have to get a drink or something, or if you've had enough? You get a really good angry man with a really good angry woman, and you have one hell of a relationship, you know. And I was trying to find that poem I wrote. Isn't Janelle in here somewhere? No, it's not in this one? Oh, didn't you? It's got to be in here. No? Where is it?
It's unprinted as of yet. Unpublished.
No, it's not. What? That poem's never been printed?
No.
You're wrong. It's got to be here. Was I a coward? Well, anyway. God, I love that poem. But it's a question of accepting who I am and telling the truth about it. That's how it is. And it's not such a tough process. But it's like every church has its dogma. Every psychologist has his direction. Every person has his guidance. He's leading us down the path. And I went through the other day, I was writing something, a book called Mad as Hell and Loving Every Minute of It. And I was reading all the things in Oasis and all the things in this catalog. I get catalogs from all over the world. And I just put 4 of them side by side, and I figured out that if I went to a different workshop every week, I'd be 10 years dead before I finished the ones just in these catalogs. And man, they had me taking shamanic journeys, and they had me beating drums, following bugles, and so forth and so on. And the whole thing was somebody was trying to tell me what to do. After 14 years of marriage and 3 kids, Bonnie decided to do something about her relationship. When Mike took up hang gliding, windsurfing, and turned the old VW into a dune buggy. At the urging of Jane, a liberated and twice divorced neighbor, she began a summer study program in feminist development. Upon reading Men Who Hate Women and Women Who Love Them, she had an affair with a bag boy at the supermarket. And began playing pool 2 nights a week at a convent. After an exciting seminar, took up hang gliding, windsurfing, and auto repair, and wrote a topic. And it is a very serious topic, but if you get mad, nobody listens, because then we're projecting. And I think the whole thing, everything becomes I was thinking today, why did St. Paul say such nasty things about the Jews? He didn't like Jews. He was a Jew. And I thought, that's right. He incorporated his bias into Scripture. And it became sanctified because it's in Scripture. This is the Word of God. And I think I could say, you damn lazy Americans, you're all alike. But when a Jap says it, Japanese person, I get so angry, I want to go over there and attack them. And I was thinking, everybody incorporates his bias into his doctrine. Something in here I wanted to read. I saw it before. I noticed that the New Age churches, the big thing seems to be, as you get in touch with your inner self, you hear the inner voice, and you also will be well rewarded, and you'll make a lot of money. And if you really think right, you will have prosperity. And I thought, well, the Catholic Church had a game. We said, if you don't live it, you'll go to hell. And now they say, if you do live it, you'll be rich. I thought that's a good hook. But see, people, I don't want prosperity from a church. I don't want Shakti Gawain from a church. Give me another affirmation. I want spiritual surge. I want freedom from the pain. I want to know who I am. And I see a person like Mike Matoin struggling to know who he is, and that's comfortable. Somebody said, well, Mike's funny all the time. Well, if you don't like funny, go somewhere else. Sarah's kind of serious, so you got your pick. But there's a million paths, and there ain't any book, and there's no answer except you. You are your own answer. That's identity. Charlie Jordan started a new church and promised the believers a Mercedes, a villa in Spain, and a Hawaiian vacation. Attendance was up 64% a month. After 12 weeks of preaching personal fulfillment, the median income of his flock is $67,000. Sid Gilbert's church leans towards Jaguars. If appropriate affirmations immediately follow acute visualizations. After 3 months, Sid had 964 followers with an increase of 4% a month. The median income of his flock is $84,000. My church is into bicycles, canoes, and long walks. The median income is not impressive. We do not visualize, affirm, or know what the hell we believe. We pray, we laugh a lot, and we have potlucks once a month. Membership, besides me, Slats O'Mara, and Johnny Cake Jones, consists of 2 blind lepers and 12 fishermen. Now, somebody can say, hey, I like the church and I want prosperity. I'm not asking you to follow me. I don't have any disciples. You know? One of the advantages is that I've tried everything. And when we have disciples, I think we're afraid that we're not going to make it. One of my favorite books is this one, Celebrate the Sun. It's a allegory. And this came to me when I was drinking martinis on the way back from Washington, D.C. to California. Honest to God, I'm not a big drinker. I rarely drink martinis, but you know what they do to you. And I just read Jonathan Livingston's Seagull, and I thought, that seagull is a neurotic. That sucker has to be the highest flyer in the world. He's going to break all the records. And I thought, and I love Richard Bach, and I love the things he writes, and I love illusions, and I love him. And I think he loves me. But the point is, I didn't like Jonathan Seagull because I thought, first of all, he's a scavenger. I hate seagulls. If you lived on the West Coast, you'd never use a seagull as for anything, you know. But I love pelicans. So my hero's a pelican, Harry Langendorf Pelican. And I actually became the world's living authority on pelicans in order to write this book. I went to museums, and I finally went down to Baja, where there are a lot of pelicans, and I camped out in Baja, Mexico, by myself, with enough tequila to make my way among the fishermen, and stayed there for 3 weeks and just watched pelicans. And watched pelicans till I could tell them apart, knew all their behavior patterns and so forth. And then I wrote this book about Harry Langendorf Pelican, Samantha Butterfield Pelican, finally divorced her, and married Dolores Larson, a very plain pelican. But he broke all the flight records in the colony. Everyone. And there's a tragedy happens, and he changes his life. And the colony is very upset, and they come to him and they said, "You become aimless, Harry Langendorf. The young cannot look up to you. What are you trying to accomplish?" "I'm not trying to accomplish anything," said Harry Langendorf. "I'm living my life." "But you've abandoned the leadership of the colony." "I'm not a leader," he said. "I have no disciples, only friends." "But who will teach the young wisdom and discipline?" "Wisdom is not taught," said Harry Langendorf. "Systems are taught. Wisdom comes from experiencing life where it never comes at all. And life is its own discipline." "You would then leave all pelicans at their present level of development, Harry Langendorf, by encouraging them to be idle and satisfied by ignoring our programs and systems?" "They don't seem interested in your systems until they're obliged to be. They seem content to fly and to eat, to love and to learn, to play and enjoy. So am I." "And would you shirk your responsibilities?" "I don't think so. Those things I once felt obligated to do now seem simply a part of my life. They became responsibilities when I drove myself to excel." "But what produces growth and progress, Harry Langendorf? Perhaps if we're not pushed and prodded or made to feel ashamed, we will achieve our growth and our joy as well." "But you must seek to find, Harry Langendorf." "No," he said, "it seems to be in not seeking that I find." This identity thing is going on all the time. It's going on every time I react to anyone. It's going on all day long. And that's why it's wonderful, because we always have a chance to practice it. But until you've established your own identity, if you sell out, manipulate someone in a relationship, for example, in a job, for example, We all do that on the way up, for God's sakes. We got to find out about our manipulations. But then pretty soon those don't work anymore. And if we really are God's child, if we really are whatever you want to call it, God's child seems simple enough to me, then it is our individual beauty that it's about. And I was reading somebody, I don't know whether it was Gary Zukav or Henry Nouwen or somebody the other day, and he was talking about that you have a sacred charge to become what you're supposed to be. And what he was effectively saying is what I call passion, what Joseph Campbell calls bliss, vocation, whatever it is. When you find that thing, then it happens. That thing may change. And it's the same way in a relationship. You know, you're trying to get somebody to love you. My first wife was a lovely lady, and at the time of our marriage, I was an insane ex-priest, and she was a troubled alcoholic. And I kept saying to my brother, but she has so much potential. You know? He says, she says the same thing about you. You know? So we're going to wait around for all that potential. That's okay if we do. But it's a process. It's a long process. There's only one mistake to be made. Not to be who you really are. Power can confuse you and friends who want not you, but what you can provide, even as they are unwilling or unable to comprehend your heart. I've been at the top and the bottom, rode the roller coaster with the best, and groveled in misery with the worst. I've leaped from bed to make the world salute my presence, and pulled the covers over my head for my own assorted fears. In the process, I've learned that I'm as fragile as an acorn in the grasp of a hungry, lusting squirrel, and as strong as the ocean that refuses despite storms and shipwrecks to cease beating relentlessly against the shore. I've learned to admire more than the rank or pedigree those wanderers and wayfarers I've known, even proud and bearded vagabonds who can still walk the earth as owners and have little to fear that has not already happened. Even death is but a step along the way, and the thought of slipping away without doctor or companion, family or friend does not intimidate. Such, by whatever strange and circuitous path, have found some God deep within themselves, a God beyond theologies, beyond definition, a God as strong and fragile as they are, a God who finally revealed himself when there really was no place else to turn. A God who loves them, because far more than I, those proud and bearded vagabonds have become who they really are. Thank you. I just go for a few more minutes, a little warm in here, and then if you want to dialogue a little bit, or you just direct me. I have a way of going on. I will be absolutely finished by 9 o'clock, I promise you that. It's about 8:30 now, but I'll quit. If you start getting restless, just get up and, you know, I'm easily offended and it won't bother me a bit. But I like this one. I've had my last brother that died of cancer was my best friend. He was a priest too, and he always. I've written a few poems on passion, you know, and I said, you got to have passion for anything, good or evil. I don't care. I'd rather have a passion for evil than to see a person who has no passion, because you know that the passion for evil will grow, and you know that the energy, like my friend I called about rage and anger today, you know, he said creative rage is a tremendous creative source. If you can harness that rage. If you can't, it's homicide. Same way depression. Depression can be a great source, but it immobilizes, and if you can't ever control it, it becomes suicide. They're just the flip side. Every time I read this, I think of Bob. And I was with him the last 3 months before he died and learned a lot. But he always said, you got passion. Since he died, there's been some times I haven't had it, I'll tell you that. And he said, in fact, the last thing he wrote me, he said, in this trembling hand of the person with too much chemotherapy, he said, you are my gold, my frankincense, and my myrrh. I thought that summed it up. You still have it. I'm going to sit here till passion returns and tells me where to go. I don't care if it's heaven or hell or home. I don't care if it's work or play or sex. I don't care if it's rich or poor or madness. I don't even care if it's riding a white horse naked on a freeway or lining up like we did as kids for a pissing contest in the old schoolyard. But baby, I'm not going anywhere, even to death, until I can go passionately. There's only one mistake to be made. Not to be who you really are. I asked the river, I wrote this in Manila. I remember looking at this river. That's where it started. And I finished it back in Colorado. I asked the river and how he would know when he got there. And he only laughed at me when I would emerge, and because I had good friends. But when I would emerge, I'd fake it when I could, and then go back under into immobilization and darkness. And I think whenever I'd go to something, I remember asking some guy in California, he's written a few books, I can't remember, I say, he says, only with anxiety, and he gave me these little things, I still have them written down, and it was about at this level. And I'm talking about terror every morning, wake up with this terror every morning. It wouldn't go away for a couple hours, and then you just have to fight it, then you medicate it, then you say, well, I won't medicate it, and so forth. And then, well, maybe somebody's hurting like I hurt. And I wish somebody had read this to me at that time. One day when the stars had disappeared and mountains were no longer my friends, when my favorite river was gray and insensitive, and even to spring's bursting melodies and the eloquent Nevada sky said nothing. When I had lost interest in birds and even trees and the moon of your soul, slowly, thus slowly, I rose from the bottom of the pit, when every fiber of my being screamed for me to lie there still. I rose up only to endure. And in the morning, for the briefest instant, I again saw the sun and rejoiced for the briefest moment that I was still alive. It was then I knew that I would indeed endure, and the ever-present pain of some purging would finally disappear, and joy would be forever mine, in my lonely and redemptive enduring. I had one poem I meant to read and something just hit me. This is a good one on identity too, and then I'll read another and we'll call it, I don't keep it too long. And then I'll stay as long as you like. But just figure, some guy might get trapped in here. You gotta go hear this guy, he's really good. He's going, oh, yeah. He's right about here, he can't get out. I've been there. The opera, I'm really good there, Find me a beer bar. Oh, that's quiet water. I know it's in this one. It's, I remember my mother used to, I had 6 brothers, my mother would always go, Phil, Tom, Dan, Jim. Really know how to hurt a guy, But I do that with my books now. It's early Alzheimer's. Anyway, I wrote this. I was in Toronto, and I like this particular poem on this occasion because I was with a couple of friends of mine up there, Large Marge and Jack the One-Eyed Jew, and we were drinking beer at this bar. And Jack was holding forth as usual. He is One-Eyed Jew. He's just got one eye, you know. And Marge is large. But I saw two men at a nearby table, and one was about 65 going on 80, and the other guy was young, and they were both salesmen. And I don't know, I just watched them for a few minutes, and that's how poetry comes, just like you, those of you that are musicians or anything else, and just in life, what we call intuitions, and that's how poems come. Then you sit down fast and write them as quick as you can go, otherwise you'll lose them. And this came on the back of a napkin up in Toronto at a lovely bar I like. I called the guy Wilford. He was the older of the two. Identity. Wilford's older now and not selling like he used to. His face a map of freeways and gravel roads. His eyes sad and distant like retirement windows. Ears deaf to quadraphonic dreams of the young associate spinning schemes transformed to weary reruns. Skeletal fingers clawing to survive with the remnants of tomorrow's energy. Passion's gone now. Pants baggy with fading memories of lusty thighs. His walk a tired shuffle, pleading for understanding and rest, with aching legs dragging him alone from bed to shower without a familiar song. Stiff hands dressed awkwardly in now vintage style, and stir the news dimly deja vu into bitter black coffee. He is culture's tragedy, selling socks or sleds or giraffes finally as extinct and pointless and degraded as he is. Once he strode boldly, sold vigorously, laughed musically. Now bourbons bite and lonely nights at unresponsive bars with quotas roaring in his brain like motel ice machines have numbed his soul in a cold and paralyzing judgment. Oh my God, how I want to drain his pain and convert his fear to laughter. Take him to those trembling Colorado aspen trees, turned autumn gold. Salute brave and barren limbs that clung too desperately and restore the leaves of love and life when only winter lies relentlessly ahead. Soon he will die, 20 years older than his 69. His mind dulled by selling shadows of his own despair. His heart tense to protest sham at a sudden explosion, and his lurking cancer angrily poised to reduce him to his childhood name. Tomorrow he's gone without an epitaph. Quotas forgotten, sales unrecorded, love lost and unspoken, and the promises he forever made. The promises he forever made to lead another kind of life will echo silently in a handful of ashes, scattered in an unmarked twilight, in a nameless wind. I know so much about him because I am him. It's all projection. There's my fear. Where does it come from? It comes from your own consciousness, because there, if I don't establish my own identity, you know, I'd be that miserable old Monsignor bawling the hell out of his parishioners by now. God bless them there. I knew a lot of good ones. But the point is, it is a struggle for identity. It's all a struggle for identity, you know, and you're sitting here right now. I am, or you are, and we've got a whole image. You know, I'm too fat, I'm too old, I don't have the right kind of work, I should have a certain kind of education. You know, screw prosperity. There's a plan. There's only one thing in the course that I read all the time, and that's that section in the manual for the teachers where it talks about trust. Because there's only about three, it says any one principle is good for the whole damn book, and I agree. And I'm not preaching the course because it's just one of my routes. I try them all. I mean, I have been everywhere. And, you know, sex worked for a while, and still works occasionally. I mean, don't knock any path. Food, fun, frolic, fame, do whatever. But ultimately it comes down to accepting who I am and knowing that there is a plan. I mean, I could look back in my life. I always love to tell the story about Virginia Graham. I left the priesthood, I left my marriage, and I was a psychologist, and then I wrote an article for Playboy that attacked all the psychologists. And that was called The New Salvationists. And they're all going to save us. Maslow's going to save us, Rogers was going to save us, you know. I pictured all these people on the beach, and I didn't know whether they were having orgasms, a psychological experience, or the sand crabs were having a field day, you know. And Virginia said, well, James, you're an ex-priest, you're an ex-husband, and you're an ex-psychologist. What does that add up to? And I said, experience, Virginia. That's the truth. You know, I think if you don't live out all your fantasies, it's no fun. You think of all those movies like, you know, that one where Nick Nolte's in Beverly Hills and the whole family was nuts, and he comes in. I never can remember names, but something in Beverly Hills. And, Down and Out. And you see all these movies where people are living out their fantasies all the time, but denying them until some person comes into their life. And a lot of people are just coming into your life to destroy your illusions and help you live out your fantasies. That's been one of my missions. The Pope recently took the Bible a step further and said that a man should not look with lust at his own wife. Edna May O'Brien, who would give anything to be lusted after again, wondered if the Pope had discussed this matter with his father. See, nobody can, I had this one poem I wanted to read, I marked it, and then I will read a close, and then we'll, just had this one poem, I don't know what the hell that is. Oh yeah, it's in here. Good boy, James. You see, we go to somebody like a church. We go to somebody like a therapist. We go to somebody like a weekend guru. And anybody knows me, knows how screwed up I have been all my life, but you really work your way through it. I'm not saying don't go to workshops. I'm glad you came tonight. You picked up something. I did too. Like that guy's smile back there. Buddy here. You know, I picked up a lot more than you know tonight, old Bill. But so did you. But you know that by now. I'm not going to give you the, even though I have a book I love called Search, which is 12 Principles of Personal Happiness. It's not it's principles, it's not me. And so most workshops I go to, I walk out on. Because the guy is trying to lead me his way. I'm trying to lead you your way. So I could care less whether you are an Orthodox Jewish rabbi or you have a mandala of 12 lovers. It doesn't matter to me. You know, if you're the final Mormon on the face of the earth with 35 spouses, who cares? The point is, do you have your identity? I mean, God made a bouquet. He didn't make a goddamn field full of daisies. There's a daisy over there, there's a rose, there's a lily, there's a, you know, and that's the problem. There's not enough bouquets. Just fields of desert flowers that are pretty. They last 3 days and they all look the same. I mean, I lived in the desert. It's the same way with a therapist. I went to this therapist when in the midst of my pain, he says, well, you're very anxious tomorrow. We'll give you a little Xanax. Still there. Give you a little more Xanax. Then the guy, $200 an hour. I don't have any insurance. So I said, could I cut this thing down to a half hour? How about 15 minutes? And what he's telling me all the time we're in there is what a hell of a guy he is. Well, I went out and did a little windsurfing today, you know. I can't get out of bed except to get to his office. Seemed a little depressed. A little depressed, you know. I mean, the gun was poised, they just couldn't afford a bullet. When the therapist told me it was my overbearing mother and my insensitive father, an arrogant church, and a starved culture that made me the mess I was, I had a few gentle questions. Who gave me my smile? A love of mountains and trees. My yearning to be a friend, a heart filled with love. And even a tormented brain, but forever on the verge of laughter. Was it the same mother and father? The same church and starved culture? Hey, I wonder if I could meet the therapist's parents. Find out what kind of kid he was. Could we share photo albums? Old high school yearbooks, swap lovers for a night. Spend a weekend camping or riding a raft down a whitewater river. Could we snowshoe through the Sierra, trudge across the desert? Hey, we'll have a lemon pie contest to see whose meringue comes out intact. And could we spend a day with my mother, read poetry, visit my old dog, my old school, and blow an afternoon with my dog? Maybe we could plant tomatoes together, bullshit at a lonely bar in Yuma, ski cautiously around moguls, turn an edge, and end up on our asses. We go to the circus, pick up ladies at a Caribbean resort, play Trivial Pursuits, have a pillow fight, Indian wrestle, meditate, tell jokes after too much beer. And finally, we could bury all judgments on mothers and fathers, churches and cultures, and accept responsibility for ourselves. Then we could sit still together and wonder if we'd ever have to therapize again. The best therapist I know does not impose her shit on other people. And that's real hard to do. I have a clinical license in psychology, and I left the profession because I imposed my shit on everyone. They're looking at the world's worst counselor. I mean, I can get $175 an hour, you know. But first of all, it's boring as hell. I don't mind listening to a friend across the table with a beer. They tell their story, I tell my story. I love that. But when they tell a story and I'm supposed to do something about it, You are your own answer. Beyond books and seers, psychics, or doctors, beyond the strength that comes from what you have accomplished, your weakness is valuable as your strength. Your helplessness is lovable as your charm. You are God's child in each step of the way. He gives you bread, not a stone. Food, not a serpent. All is part of the plan, and as you look within and listen to that quiet, persistent voice that tells you who you are, there's no strength greater than yours. No strength greater than yours. No wisdom not available to you. And love and light will flood your being when you believe deeply enough to know you're your own answer in the beauty and creativity that make us all one. No one beyond our love. No one not connected. Abandon anger and fear to the wind, but express it. Abandon anger and fear to the wind, sadness and pseudo-strength to the earth. Be who you are in whatever state. Then you will discover you are your own answer. In the silence of your heart, where all light and power dwell forever. Don't let anyone talk you out of your pain. Don't let anyone talk you out of your sadness. Don't let anyone talk you out of your fear. Don't let anyone talk you out of your anger. Don't let anyone talk you out of your lust. Don't let anyone talk you out of your horniness. Don't let anyone talk you out of your madness. Don't let anyone talk you out of your insanity. They're all steps to reality and to God and to you. And it's all the same. I don't know if I've given you anything tonight. I never know. I just read you one last poem. I'll close with a love poem. One love poem. I marked it if I can find it. I haven't read a love poem all night. Where's that one I marked? So pretty. Oh yeah, here it is. It's called I Have Feared Love. I never read this, and I saw it today and I thought, I have feared love with all its hidden demands, with its misty promises and drying skin, with its moist eyes and my own deepest concern that once I settled on one, I might finally find the other destined for me. I feared love because I may have waited too long and kept intact the memory of too much pain at its passing. Finally, I have lived long enough to know that such fear is groundless, pale, passionless compared to the fear of never having known love at all. That is fear indeed, to wake up each morning without anyone to share the day or a cup of coffee, or is it Sanka now, love? To settle into the darkest night without cuddling or caring or knowing that to one I am worth life itself and more. I watched my father die and wondered what he shared with my mother. Wondered how two so often silent and distant could endure 50 years. Now I know, because my own life has crossed boundaries that are never crossed again. To have a child with one and then another, to be together when presidents die or friends are taken prematurely, to share 1,000 laughs and tears, 10,000 meals, to say hello and goodbye, good night and good morning beyond all counting or remembrance, to see each other through tragedy and desperation, to wonder what life means and feel a trusting form next to you, or hear a child's voice echoing over a summer afternoon, to know that weeks soon pass like months and months years, to know that yesterday will not return and tomorrow is not forever. It is not love I now fear, but a life without it. And every breath I breathe from this moment will hold it in mind and heart. In the very depths of my own loneliness, and every least dream I still have to share. More than anything else, I want to hold you in my arms gently beyond sex and security, prestige and triumph, to say once and for all I love you, and mean it from the top of my head to the depths of my soul. This is the love that casts out fear, that makes life worth living, that takes a man and woman on the earth and lifts them finally above every power or pain that could ultimately wound them. I have seen so many sights, heard so many words, but none as beautiful as the sight and sound of a man and woman of mature years who say with their every act, their eyes, and all their being, whether in 1 year or 50, who say with their every act, their eyes, and all their being, I love you. Thank you. If I more. If I offended or hurt anybody's feelings, beat the hell out of Pat Boyle over here if you would. Now, if you anybody comment or anything, or I don't want to hurry you off. You know me. Just give all those that want to escape a chance to escape, and I'll read a couple more just for fun ones. But now, please, if you don't want to sit there, don't be nice. After all that talking of identity, problem is you can't smoke here, can you? Huh?
You gotta go downstairs.
Oh, bullshit. Give me an ashtray, will you? No, you can't? Is this a sanctuary? Any questions, observations? Pardon? Okay. Huh? I know that, my dear. I lived in one. I wore vestments in one. Oh, yes. Okay, well. Huh?
Are you going to publish Man-Child?
Which one?
Man-Child?
How'd you know about Man-Child?
I read it.
Huh?
I read your manuscript.
You did? How'd you read that?
Mike loaned it to me to read.
Mike who?
Matoy.
Did he? How'd Mike get it? How did Mike get it?
You gave it to me.
Oh, I'll be damned. Well, I'm going to publish some of it, I guess. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. You know? Did you like it? Huh? Just as it is? Needs some shaping.
I like
Oh, okay. Yes.
I heard some theologians, I believe, on television this last week say that without absolutes, what's happening today is everybody's just rationalizing everything away. And this really frightens me. I feel in conjunction with everything else that we're failing as a nation not to address, and we have some terrible, not over it. I mean, I don't know if there's another word for over and over it, but that's the way to put it. The problems that we have. And then, what we spoke of tonight, it's just like, wow. It's very hard for anybody, to have an identity. When you have all these people, and I call them sociopaths, that just rationalize everything away, because we're losing our values, our principles, and that the core of your being is annihilated when people do that. They're giving themselves, they're compromising themselves, they're just giving themselves away.
See, I always feel that the only way, because you observe a lot of things, and as a social critic, which this new book is, I'm having a lot of fun with. But once you realize, and you have faith that the same God and the same guide that's directing you and me, if you really feel that presence in some degree, is the same God and guide that's directing nations, directing peoples, gave us this Bill Clinton, a Jerry Brown, old Jerry. I never thought he'd rise again. I've known him for years. I never thought, you just say, I used to like my mother. I came back to Chicago from California because my mother had a stroke. Okay, and I think she was over in Kalamazoo, and I thought I better be close to her, so I'll stay here. And then I think, God, I better get over there, or what'll I say, or how'll I do it, and one day it occurred to me, she's got the same God I got. And mine's pretty damn good. I mean, we've been through some hard times, and I have lots of moments of pain still. And I look at the same way at our nation. And I think we don't have a strong leader because we don't need one. And we have an overbearing pope because we need one. Because people have to know he doesn't amount to a damn. He's a myth. He's a relic of history. He comes from the ages of kings. If we had a real nice pope like John the 23rd, you'd want to hang around and try to get in there. But this guy makes it impossible, He's a good man, holy man. But geez, who could listen to the guy? I mean, he gave his Christmas. I watched the Christmas Mass in the Vatican. All these little kids came up with the altar breads. I was watching with a friend, and she said, geez, what should you do with those little kids? I said, call Oliver Stone. I'd build the whole thing around the kids. Get rid of the fat man of the pulpit with a wrinkle in his forehead, These little kids from Japan, from Singapore, from everywhere were bringing up the altar breads. So we're being taken care of.
No, I don't think so.
I do. But there's no way of knowing, so it's just a point of view. And I don't think we're going down the tubes. I don't think anything's going to happen. I have no fear of nuclear war. I would have disarmed centuries ago, but obviously I won't be elected. I don't think World War II worked. I don't think World War I worked. I don't think World War II was any more necessary than Korea. And I'm obviously way off because everybody believes that Eisenhower and Patton were heroes. It's just Korea and Vietnam where we got all screwed up. And Hitler would have taken over the whole world, and what would he have done with it? So I don't believe any of that. I just believe it's all happening, and that I see so many signs. Like this Episcopal bishop said Sunday, right after that thing on public television on the Bible, which was pretty good. I listened to this guy, Sunday Club or something. He just said one important thing. He said, there are two churches. One's dying, and and one's coming back to life. And I live with the people who are coming back to life. So how can I believe in the people who are dying? But I'm not the person to answer that question, because I think we're being taken care of. And that there's a masterful plan for my life. I never intended to be a poet. I never intended to leave the priesthood. I never intended to write a book about the Catholic Church. My whole life has been an accident. You know, I was the most surprised person in the world when they sold 1 million copies of a book I wrote. You know what my advance was? $2,500. You think my publisher wasn't surprised? There's been too many, what do you call it? What's the word? Symmetrical, symmetry, or? Synchronicity. Ah, I love that word. But don't believe me. If you believe another way, believe your way. I'm not your man. I'm not your man. I'd be damned if I'm going to go around thinking we got a problem. There's no recession. It's all bullshit. Jeez. All weak people telling us their fears, redefining us. I don't have their fears. I don't give a shit what happens on Wall Street. I don't know if it goes down to 9. I don't care. I don't care what the prices of houses are in Lake Forest or Schaumburg. I'm never going to buy one. Who the hell wants one? I'm watching Michael Jordan put up his mausoleum out near my publishing office, and I think, who wants to live in there? I don't want to live in there. I don't think Michael does. He's got more sense than that. So it all depends on your vision. Our mind rules us. I was listening to Jose, what's his name? Silva. It's the Silva mind control method. Those tapes are a wonderful little guy, you know. He figured it all out for himself with his family. Never went to school. So when Nightingale Conant sends you those tapes, you can keep them 30 days free. Isn't that a good deal? Listen to them in 2 weeks, send them back, cost you nothing, man. Anything else?
Can you talk a little bit about how you became a poet?
Yes. I was badly mutilated by all my teachers into believing that I couldn't write anything. That poets were men that talked about steel vaginas washing their ways against the black pork Belfeld jungles of the unrealities of the obscure intensities of... And if you could be understood, you weren't a poet. People knew what the hell you were saying. You were obviously a fraud. So then, so I gave it up. And when I was a priest, I liked to write, but then I couldn't write because teachers told me that too, because I didn't write like John Ruskin. So finally, people said, my brother said, why don't you write a column for the paper? I said, Bishop won't let me. He said, to hell with him. He's out of town for 3 weeks. Just tell Ken you're going to put it in. So I wrote this column called Heart to Heart. People liked it. The time the bishop came back, he couldn't get it out. So I was a writer. At least I knew that. And then I was in New York. I'd left the priesthood, wrote the book, or 2 books, one Birth of God and one Modern Priest. And then I went to New York and I was broke. My first wife and I managed to spend all the money. And I thought, I can write a musical. So I got this idea for a musical. I used to write musicals. And it was about the revolution that was going on. And it was going to be something on the Wall Street. There'd be a revolutionary company, and they would supply you with a token black. They would start you with a nude party, anything in revolution. And then I wrote all the songs for it. You know, little, and so forth. And the songs were really good. And I called the guy that wrote the music for Hair and said, you want to work together on this? And he said, what do you got? And he said, God, that's good. I said, yeah, I know. But he wouldn't do it. So I was my money was going. And it was finally went from where Pat Boone lived to where Slats O'Mara lived, you know. It was just, and I couldn't live very well because I didn't have any money. So I would go to publishers and I would give them fake ideas for books because I'd written a #1 New York Times bestseller. So in New York, and I'd say, I got this idea for a book. They would give me enough food from that meal that I could live the rest of the week by stuffing food. And in the process of writing these lyrics, poetry came out. And listen to this, that one poem I read. It's just the first verse. I would go to these martini luncheons every day and was writing these poems, and they said, we don't want poetry. 26 people turned this book down. And it sold over 1 million copies. And you've never seen it advertised. And what did I write? There are men too gentle to live among wolves who prey upon them with their IBM eyes, they won't sell, and sell their hearts and guts for martinis at noon. I went out every noon with a different publisher just to stay alive. So in the course of writing this, suddenly this stuff just came. So I couldn't sell it in New York. I go back to San Diego. My wife and I are going to try to give it another hit, see if we can make it, because we liked each other. And we go to hear Michael McClure read his poetry. And 2 other of those modern poets, Ginsberg or some guys like that. And they're reading this stuff. You know, Michael McClure is reading something like, zoom, zoom, the planes came, zoom, zoom, over the valley, zoom, zoom. And my wife, who is just a wondrously, I love her to this day, and she says, you're better than he is. I said, I am? She said, yeah. I said, you sure? She said, damn sure. She said, why don't you get up and read some of your poetry? I said, are you kidding here? But the next day, that gave me a little boost of confidence. And she said, you're going to do something about that poetry. I said, Patty. She said, yes. Call Bob Wilkie. So I called Bob Wilkie up in Los Angeles. He was now sales manager of a very small publishing company about that big. And I said, Bob, he said, hey, where you been? I said, well, I've been around. He said, you write anything? I said, yeah. But what? I said, sit down. I said, poetry. He said, I want it. You wrote it? I want it. And that's how it started. Accident. Scared to death. But when you're on the road, it'll lead you. It'll lead you, you know. It happens. But that doesn't mean I didn't go to 26 publishers and take their abuse. And they're all telling you, I mean, New York is that's really heavy, New York. You know, they really know what culture is, man. And alcohol. But, you know. But it's just got to be your passion. I mean, I could not write. And then I get long periods when I can't write any poetry. But, you know, this stuff all rolls. I mean, I think it was so primitive. Come with Cain and me, east of Eden towards the sea, in desert lands called Nod, where murderers live, and lovers, grown weary of Abel and his God. The mark upon our faces, sadness, and horror is the color of our eyes. We've known pain too steep for sunlight, known pain unweepable by all the waters of the skies. We are weary men, too mad for mothers to bear, too angry to suck soft breasts of flesh, lest we bite them, to be bathed in blood and drink the redness sweet and fresh, for thirst unquenchable in Adam's wells. I love this. Jesus, I love it to this day. You know, it just rends my heart. I saw my face today and it looked older, without the warmth of wisdom or the softness born of pain awaiting. The dreams were gone from my eyes, hope lost in hollowness on my cheeks, a finger of death pulling at my jaws. So I did my push-ups. And I wondered if I'd ever find you to see my face with friendlier eyes than mine. You know, it's so pure, because I didn't do it. You know, we're not going around saying, I'm Bartholomew, I'm a channeler. We're all channelers, but this is my thing, you know. Yes, I channeled tonight. I'm going to just, because I love the poem so, I'm going to recite the one that about my Chicago background, because my people came from Chicago. My 2 grandmothers came from Ireland, landed here when they're kids. And then one grandfather, they lived in the west side. My grandfather had a bakery out 5663 West Madison for years. And I went out there later. They were doing a film on me here in Chicago. And my poetry, I had to go along the beach and everything. And I said, can we go out to my grandma's bakery? And it was a black bar now. And so I go in there and the bartender, he's a real neat guy. And I said, my grandpa used to have this as a bakery. Can I come in here? And he said, yeah. And then 3 cameras come in and a sound man. And on the L's and things. But this particular poem, and I will close with that. Some people want me to sign a book or something. Came like that. And I think with all the pain and the effort, and you know, my life's been no easier than yours and probably no harder, but I've known pain and a lot of it, and discouragement and failure. And you know, sometimes I've written a couple novels and you think, well, you ought to write the novels. And my friend in California is always saying, God, you could write that Danielle Steele shit coming right out your ears, man. She tells the same story, just changes the place. And I said, well, I will. I get a little older. You know, it's like golf, I'll do it. But this poem, I was thinking about my Irish background. And so help me God, it would be just like I sat here and you said, I want to show you my painting. And I said, I looked at it and then I sat down and it came. And I don't know how this works, but anyway, it's so personal. And I love it. And I've never tried to memorize it, but I can't forget it. And it goes like this. Let's see. My blood flows from some ancient spring. Listen to music here now, given to you. In a silent country graveyard, nestled among green hills, Ireland, covered with mist in the morning where the fog drenches the grass and gives ghostly shapes to the trees. My blood flows from angry peasants, now turned to bitter gray ashes with too many children to fight the inner wars and too little time to tell an untold story. These are not my wounds you see, mine are simple enough. These are not my scars you tend, mine are normal enough. But my blood is the piled up pain of peasants who laughed away their hurt in rollicking stories and sang away their sadness in melancholy songs and walked to church in winter to honor a God who had no time for cowards. Well, I'll be the coward for them all. The tongue of that blacksmith in Tipperary who beat his anvil passionately to silence his rage and drank his whiskey amber to soften his pain. The voice of a baker in Chicago who punched his bread in murderous eloquence and buttered his crust at dawn in a lover's gentleness and drank his beer frothy in choking silence. The lips of those women I will be in their house dresses, laughing in fake furs over long underwear, smiling at priests with grinding molars, calling their children with shrill screams, scrubbing their floors with clenched fists and boiling their cabbage in hot rage. The voices of families too bruised to trust, too frightened to hope, too angry to love, gentle with strangers, brutal with their own, singing God's praises, cursing their loved ones, brooding, praying, crying, hating, fearing, dying. So much pain filtered in my blood, so much bitterness buried in my bones, so much rage locked in my flesh, and I will be the coward to tell the untold story of a silent country graveyard where the fog drenches the grass and gives ghostly shapes to the trees. Isn't that nice?